WFSU-FM now presents a delayed broadcast of the Economic Club of Florida luncheon meeting of June 22, 2012. This event took place at the Tallahassee-Leon County Civic Center.
I can see you're enjoying yourselves, and I hope you are also enjoying the food. My name is Bill Gunter, and I'm the president of the Economic Club of Florida. And I would like to welcome you to this 440th in our series of distinguished speaker programs. I'm sad to acknowledge the passing about a month ago of a gentleman who was very close to many of us, Stanley L. Tate of Tallahassee. Stan was a founding member of the Economic Club of Florida and was its long-time executive vice president. He had a vision of what the Economic Club could become during the early years, and he stayed with the club, providing leadership through good times and difficult times. Failure of this organization was not an option as far as Stan Tate was concerned. His legacy to us is a strong, vibrant, dynamic club that informs members through distinguished and knowledgeable speakers on the issues of the day. Your board of directors is working on a way to honor Stan's memory throughout the years ahead, but for now he lives on in our hearts as a beloved husband, father, brother, and friend. He will be missed. So join me, if you will, in a moment of silence as we think about the remarkable accomplishments of this man. Thank you. Please, if you will, make a note on your calendars that we have an outstanding program booked for our July meeting. On July 31st, we'll welcome to our podium the President and CEO of Visit Florida, Chris Thompson. We're all aware that tourism is number one as an economic driver for our Sunshine State. And Visit Florida is the marketing organization that promotes tourism visits to Florida with the goal of establishing our state as the number one travel destination in the world. Of course, that means jobs and more jobs. Chris will also address the recovery of the tourist industry here in Florida following the BP oil spill disaster in the Gulf. Chris Thompson is here today. Will you stand and take a bow, please, Chris? And while we are recognizing important guests, we're certainly very proud to acknowledge the presence of Florida's Secretary of State, Ken Detzner. Please stand, Mr. Secretary. We appreciate your public service. On July 21st, at our monthly meeting, we're going to hear from another one of our own club members, Florida Secretary of Commerce, Gray Swope. Gray is also President and CEO of Enterprise Florida. He will give us his assessment of our state's economy and how the governor's new job program is going. As an info commercial to the non-member guests here today, the Economic Club of Florida is open for new members. So if you're interested, please contact a club member or an officer, and they will help you to sign up. If you want more information, check out our website at www.economic-club.com. Now I'd like to introduce the head table. And if you will, as is our custom, please hold your applause until I presented the entire head table. Beginning on my left and your right is Governor Wayne Mixon. Wayne was the 39th governor of Florida. He served as lieutenant governor under Governor Bob Graham, and previous to that, spent 12 years in the Florida legislature. Governor Mixon is also a former Florida Secretary of Commerce and served in the U.S. Navy during World War II. He's a chairman emeritus of our club, as well as a sustaining member and a member of the executive committee. The governor is responsible for securing our distinguished speaker here today. On my left, next to Wayne, is our speaker, Undersecretary of Commerce for International Trade, Francisco Sanchez. Frank will be introduced by the governor in just a moment, but I should alert the media that the Undersecretary will be happy to spend some time with them immediately following the question and answer period here on our program. On my far right and on your left is relatively new member Dr. Bob McClure. Bob is the president and CEO of James Madison Institute, an organization that has just moved into its new office digs in downtown Tallahassee. Congratulations on that, Bob. The James Madison Institute is a nonpartisan policy research organization based in our state, but with members across the country and around the world. A fifth-generation Floridian, PhD Bob McClure, was appointed by Governor Jeb Bush to the Florida Elections Commission. Currently, he serves on the Florida Economic Advisory Council, appointed by Governor Scott. Previously, he was a member of the Florida Education Strategic Planning Council, the Florida Committee for the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, and the Board of Directors of Leadership Tallahassee. He was also president of the St. Peter's Anglican Church Foundation. Next to Bob is well-known internationalist Nat Turnbull, Jr. I take some credit for Nat's successful career as an international policy advisor because he served as my legislative aide during my first term in the Florida Senate. And before that term was complete, Nat was off to Europe and later Vietnam, where he served as a decorated U.S. Army captain. But Nat, of course, has lived and worked in various hotspots all around the globe. Nat has been the executive director of the Florida International Affairs Commission and served as director of international relations for the Florida Department of State. He also served as the international economic advisor for the Florida League of Cities and as director of the League's International Academy for Municipal Officials. Currently, he is president of Turnbull and Associates, specializing in governmental advocacy and international communications and transportation consulting. Nat Turnbull is a longtime member of the club and a longtime friend of our speaker, and also is an incumbent member of our board of directors. Next to Nat and on my right is a brand new member of our club, but not a brand new laborer in the vineyard of public service. He is our favorite Florida State Senator, Bill Munford. Bill was elected to the District 6 seat in the Florida Senate on November 4th of 2010 and has been on the job representing us for the last 2 legislative sessions. He also serves as CEO for the Florida Association of District School Superintendents. Senator Munford was Leon County School Superintendent for 10 years prior to being elected to the Senate. Before that, he served as a member of the Board of County Commissioners of Leon County. Career-wise, Bill Munford was an effective school administrator for 26 years. All 4 of my children graduated from Lincoln High School while Bill was principal there, and all I can say is that was an absolute miracle and an answer to prayer. Thank you, Bill. The William J. Munford Middle School in Tallahassee was named after Senator Munford for his dedication to improving the educational process for our children. Senator, you are a welcome new member of our club. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in recognizing the head table. Another distinguished participant who is a member of our board of directors and who should be recognized is our lottery secretary, Cindy O'Connell. Cindy, would you please stand? She's a very active director and is going to be even more active now, she promises. Now let me remind you, ladies and gentlemen, to please turn off your cell phones as a courtesy to our speaker, and I'm going to call on Governor Wayne Mixon to come and introduce our distinguished guest.
Bill, thank you very kindly. I'm so all puffed up today in the presence of so many of distinguished young folks that I had around me when they were younger and working for me. The rules forbid me to tell you who all they are, but I got to remind you that our speaker next week, Chris Thompson, became Chief of Staff immediately after this one up here was Chief of Staff. Just giving you some idea about the quality of people we had around. You will forgive me if I take a little more than the allotted 3 minutes to introduce everybody, because Bill Gunter took that long to introduce me as just sitting at the head table. Well, thank you very much. Frank Sanchez is a unique young man. He was born from a great family in Tampa, and he went to work for me in the campaign on his 19th birthday. I thought he was the brightest 19-year-old I'd ever known, and I still haven't taken that back. He was certainly. His birthday was the same as my birthday. And for the last 33 years, there hasn't been a time that I haven't talked to him from Bogota, Colombia, somewhere in Brazil or somewhere in France or somewhere. He calls every time. And he calls Margie on her birthday, and he's never missed. Margie wanted to adopt him when we were younger. But his mother and daddy wouldn't sign the papers. He's a young man of intelligence, integrity, and good looks, as you can see, and great personal charms and accomplishments. He almost got fired the first week he worked for me. I'm going to tell you about that story. Margie and I were campaigning on the Graham motorhome. We left out of Orlando one morning, and we made every little radio station that there is on the I-10 corridor there going to Tampa. We got to Tampa about 12:15, and I was bushed, I can imagine. So I said, I'm going to sit down in this corner and put my feet up, bring me a sandwich, somebody. Frank says, no, you're not. Says, you speak to the Tiger Bay in St. Petersburg in 30 minutes. So that's the kind of eager he was. So he went to work at his job, which was campaigning, scheduling, transportation coordinating, and just generally managing my campaign. 2 weeks later, Frank had, this is really the fact that he gave me, he had 42 airplanes with pilots ready to come and take us anywhere in the state of Florida. Me or Bob, either one. He'd rounded up those in 2 weeks. He had dozens of motorhomes and willing drivers. He had automobiles, county sheriffs, policemen, all kind of county officials all ready to go and take us on the campaign where we wanted to go. And most of all, he had Burt Reynolds' helicopter for me to fly in South Florida. I remember when I got in, I could imagine that seat was still warm where Dolly Parton had been sitting there. As Undersecretary of Commerce for International Trade, I cannot imagine any position that Frank Sanchez can hold for which he had better training. International growth was the most important and the growing and promising sector that was growing in Florida to create jobs when we were in office. And you've read about Governor Scott's trade mission to Brazil and to Israel and several places. Well, that's not new to Frank Sanchez. He still does those things at a much bigger scale than we did. But he knows that we conducted dozens of trade missions every year, 25 to 50 people with their order pads in their hip pocket, going to South American countries, meeting with the U.S. ambassador when we got there, who would invite them in and have a reception for the customers that they were going to meet down there. And Frank, it worked, and we became this button on my lapel was pinned on me in the Rose Garden by Ronald Reagan. And Frank can tell you it's the E button, excellence for exports. Frank can tell you how important that E button is. we were recognized as the leading state in that effort. Well, I tell you, on those trips, that we sold everything in the world. We sold $300 million worth of aircraft parts on one mission to China, and we sold everything to Bull Seaman for South America, and a lot of it. There was a variety of products. That's very true. That's probably bigger than you think it is, too. Those are scrawny animals in South America, and they want to improve them. Frank, are you going to make a serious speech after this? Well, you read it in your bulletins there. Frank was Assistant Secretary of Aviation for the U.S. Department of Transportation under Bill Clinton, President Clinton, Special Assistant to President Clinton on matters of trade in South America. We were so proud of him. He had 15 years of practice in law, and he doesn't have time to tell you about his specialty that he learned at Harvard and at FSU, and that is conflict resolution. He went to Germany, he went to Russia, he went everywhere in the world trying to settle conflicts between governments, intergovernments, or governments and business, and business and business. And we needed him to have that skill when he was in commerce, but he didn't have it in those days. Frank, there's some more things I got down here, but I won't tell all I know about you. But let's give a great big economic club welcome to Frank Sanchez.
Wow. That is about the nicest introduction that I have ever had. Thank you very, very much, Governor Mixon. I want to tell you, I'm still selling those products. Other things too, but the Bull Seaman and the airplane parts, we're still selling them. And I also want to tell you that paybacks are tough. He's not kidding you. I remember that day like it was yesterday when he thought he had a half hour, 45 minutes to put his feet up, and I said, no, sir, you don't. You're going to give a speech in 30 minutes. And now when I do my travel, I may be in Russia, or yesterday I was flying back from Warsaw, Poland. My staff often starts our days at 7 a.m. with a breakfast meeting, and usually the day doesn't end till 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and it's very little in between. And it's been more than one night when I've gone to my room, I said, I bet Wayne Mixon talked to my staff and said, you do to him what he did to me. But, Governor, thank you for everything that you've done for the state of Florida, for the people of Florida, and particularly for me. The governor's absolutely right. We met the day I turned 19, and he said it turns out that we shared the same birthday. So we can say that we celebrated a birthday just a few days ago. You can say happy birthday to us. It's all right. And I'll tell you a little more. I just signed on as a volunteer in the Bob Graham campaign for governor. And at that time, I didn't know a lot about politics. I certainly didn't know about campaigning, but I worked very hard in my first few days. And I went from a volunteer to paid staff. And you didn't know this because the campaign manager is the one that gave me my salary. I got paid $60 a week, but at least I got to work 80 hours a week. But I was soon assigned as an aide to Lieutenant Governor Mixon, and I have to tell you that I was just hoping at that point to get along with my new boss, maybe learn a little bit from him, but my expectations grew from that very first day when I met Wayne Mixon. Wayne started as my boss. He became my mentor, then my friend. I get a little emotional. Yeah, clap a little bit. I need a minute. I consider he and Margie family, and I value everything that you've done. I will tell one more funny story about Wayne Mixon. I served, among other roles, as chief of staff, but I also served as his travel aide. And he noticed I'd get a little nervous when the plane that we were in would bump along. We were in these small state aircrafts most of the time. And every time I looked at him, he gave me this reassuring smile. And so sure enough, if the plane would do like this, I'd look over to him and we're okay, we're okay. So one night, we were in Altamont Springs. And the governor was speaking at the Altamont Springs Chamber of Commerce. And he, because he's a pilot, had checked the weather. And there were thunderstorms clear across Florida. And he knew there was no path to get back to Tallahassee except through these thunderclouds. So we get back after his speech, and he tells the pilot, now look, I don't have to get back to Tallahassee. We can spend the night here. We get up first thing in the morning, and the pilot said, oh no, Governor, everything's fine. I've got a flight path that'll take us right around these clouds and these showers. And once again, Governor says, I don't have to get to Tallahassee. He says, no, 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 I promise you, we're going to fly around this stuff. So we both get in the plane, and within 15 minutes, this plane has taken 500-foot drops. And I know I'm as white as a sheet. And I'm looking at Wayne Mixon. Of course, by now, we'd had this routine. This has been going on now for about 2 years. So he continues to give me that reassuring look. Everything's fine. We're going to be okay. When we finally land, after taking about a dozen of those long drops, he gets out of that plane. I'd never seen him so pissed off in my life. And I realized he was just as scared as I was. But he didn't want me to be afraid, and he was going to continue to give me that reassuring look. So thank you for that, too, Governor. And let me just say about Mrs. Mixon, who's here in the audience, I've learned a lot from her. She is the most gracious woman I have ever met in my life. A class act. And I have to say, this is a real treat for me. You're thanking me for being here. I got to thank you for letting me come here, because I just look around. I've got so many friends. I see Lisa Miller, who with Mary Pat used to walk the entire 22 stories for exercise, the entire 22 stories of the Capitol. I have to tell you, if we did that today, we'd need an emergency medical unit at the bottom. But Mary Lou Rachel and her husband Gerald, Bobby McCowan, Secretary of State Ken Detzner. We're getting old, Ken. Reggie Garcia. I could go on. Chris Thompson. Chris and I pretty much started together at the Department of Commerce. It is really great to be here. General Snowden, where's the general? There he is over there. Pleasure to see you. Thank you for your distinguished service to our country. And Bill Gunter, a good friend. And thank you for your distinguished years of service to Florida and to our nation. Senator Munford, Mr. McClure, Nett, good to see you again. Secretary O'Connell, very good to see you. And finally, let me just thank all of you for showing up. I'm delighted that you're here, and thank you for all that you do to support business. It is the absolute backbone of our country and our economy. So what you do matters, and I thank you. The governor mentioned that I was born and raised in this state, and although I'm currently living in Washington, D.C., Florida will always be my home. I have a lot of great memories here. I have family that's still here, and much of my history is here right in Tallahassee. After the Graham-Mixon campaign ended, I had the pleasure of working in the governor's office and then later at the Department of Commerce. And I have to say, as I look around, there are enough of you here who are old enough to remember the inauguration of Bob Graham and Wayne Mixon. And you may also remember there were a lot of people who, when Bob Graham and Wayne Mixon started their campaign, said it'll be a cold day in hell before those two guys are ever in the governor and lieutenant governor's office. And you may also remember that on Inauguration Day, it did feel like hell had frozen over and gotten cold. The wind chill was below, I think it was below 20 degrees, if I remember, maybe right around 0. So I remember the weather. But I also remember what Bob Graham said in his inauguration. And he said two things that really stuck with me. That he had a dream for a Florida of equal opportunity and of expanding prosperity. And I know that you share the dream that Bob Graham had and Wayne Mixon had, and who he carried it out very diligently in his role as Lieutenant Governor and Secretary of Commerce. Unfortunately for many Americans in recent years, this dream has really been a challenge. And we've seen these challenges emerge in a variety of ways. Businesses closing down, people losing their jobs, and all as a result of an economic crisis that we've not seen the likes of since the Great Depression. In fact, it was 5 years ago this month that the Wall Street Journal reported that 2 hedge funds operated by Bear Stearns were nearing a meltdown. There was trouble because of big bets on subprime securities. Now, this was an eye-opener for many, many people. After all, this same firm had posted record earnings just the year before. And now, all of a sudden, here are these reports of huge losses. And people wondered what would happen to Bear Stearns. They wondered what would happen to the rest of the financial services industry, and I dare say what would happen to our economy. Well, I don't need to tell you the rest of the story. We know that the financial system was brought to the brink of collapse. Credit for businesses froze up, houses foreclosed, and the economy plunged into a deep recession. And to give it some context, when President Obama took office in 2009, our economy was losing 800,000 jobs per month. 800,000 jobs. That's an enormous number. If we think about the building that we're in, and you filled it to capacity, and each person in here was given a pink slip, then you got rid of all those folks, brought in another group and another, that's the equivalent of doing that 60 times over. That's the equivalent to the job losses that the economy was facing back in 2009 when the president took office. But even in the most trying of times, our country has had some important things going for it. And that's resilience, imagination, talent, and the work ethic of the American people. Throughout the history of our country, markets have always gone up and down. But the American entrepreneurial spirit always endures. The productivity of the American worker always has been strong. And these traits are part of who we are as Americans. We're dreamers, we're creators, we're builders. The spirit in Henry Ford, when he developed the assembly line to achieve his goal of affordable automobiles for the masses. The spirit that was in Steve Jobs when he sold his Volkswagen minibus to raise capital and pursue his dream of building personal computers. And this spirit is currently in American entrepreneurs across this country. Entrepreneurs that are both known and unknown, operating businesses both large and small. And all they need is a chance to succeed. Now, under my role as Undersecretary of Commerce for International Trade, I am very proud to give them the chance through exporting. And I view this as very, very important work at a very important time. Dick Parsons, the former head of Time Warner, has said that we're in a period of an accelerating pace of change. And to illustrate his point, he cited an example. And it's a question that I would pose to you. What was the best performing stock in the early 1990s? Anybody want to take a guess? What's that? It was America Online. Here, just 12 years later, when you think about technology, AOL isn't even a blip on the screen anymore. So technology is changing very, very fast. And the economy is changing very fast. And as a result, the landscape today is very much different from the time that we all grew up in. In the old days, if you owned a business, the competition was generally across the street. Now it is all over the world. And in this new climate, businesses have to be ready to operate globally, more than ever. Success here at home depends on success abroad. And unfortunately, a very, very small percentage of American businesses export. Of those that do, about 58% of them only export to one country, usually Canada or Mexico. This is not enough. We can do better. We must do better as a nation. And this is the message that I take all over the United States when I talk to business. Exporting is not something to fear. It's not something to shy away from. It is an opportunity. It's an opportunity to reach more customers. 95% of the world's consumers, 95%, live outside the borders of the United States. I mean, can you imagine having a retail store that ignores 95 out of every 100 people that walk by it? Yet, if you have a business with an exportable good or service and you're not engaging in exports, that's exactly what you're doing. Exporting provides an opportunity to reach promising markets. According to the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, roughly 80% of the economic growth through 2015 in the world will happen outside our borders. So exporting provides an opportunity to attract more customers. 80% of the world's purchasing power resides outside our borders. So there are a lot of opportunities. If you couple this with the fact that American-made products continue to be in great demand all over the world, and one should see that this is an incredible potential for our country's economic progress. Exporting generates widespread benefits. When an American good or service is sold abroad, those revenues come back home and they can be used for more investment, for expansion, for jobs. So exporting benefits not only the business, but it benefits our economy as a whole. It is really the key, I believe, to our economic recovery. And President Obama recognized this very early on in his administration. He launched the National Export Initiative with a goal of doubling exports by the end of 2014. And I'm very happy to report to you that we have had great success. More businesses are reaching more markets and making more sales. As a result, last year, U.S. exports soared to $2.1 trillion in total value. That's an all-time record for the United States. And more importantly, those exports supported 10 million jobs. That's an increase of 1.2 million jobs from 2009, and these are high-paying jobs. Jobs that are tied to exporting tend to pay between 15% and 17% more than the national average. And this is absolutely helping drive the economic recovery. Under the President's leadership, we've had 27 straight months of private sector growth and roughly the creation of 4.3 million jobs. The manufacturing sector is the strongest it has been since the 1990s. Manufacturing employment has risen by nearly 500,000 in the last 28 months. And to keep this going, as we say at the Department of Commerce, we've got to help companies build it here and sell it everywhere. And we are working to expand opportunity through exports in a number of ways. The first is simply raising awareness. We're working to take the mystery out of the export process. And many small businesses think that only big firms can play in the global marketplace. Others don't even know where to start. To address these concerns, we have a very talented staff at the Commerce Department. They're located in more than 100 cities around the country, and around the United States, and 70 offices around the world. And I am very, very proud of the person that we have right here in Tallahassee who works very hard every day for American businesses. I tell people I have the best job in the world. I promote American business worldwide. But it is folks like Mike Higgins who work and do the nitty-gritty for your businesses day in and day out. And I'd like Mike to stand and be recognized. There he is. Give him a round of applause. Mike and his colleagues have helped companies export for the first time. He's helped other companies that have already exported before get into new markets. And for Florida businesses, one region that is full of great potential is the Western Hemisphere. Because of our geographic ties, Florida is uniquely positioned to succeed in these important markets. I can tell you that it is ripe with potential. 40% of all U.S. merchandise exports already go to the Western Hemisphere. So our economic and commercial ties are already very strong. And the United States has 5 free trade agreements representing 11 countries in the Western Hemisphere. This includes the government of Colombia, which we brought into effect the trade agreement on May 15th. And as a result of that trade agreement, American companies now have access, duty-free access, to the 3rd largest economy in South America. 80% of U.S. exports of consumers and industrial products to Colombia will now enter that market duty-free. And the remaining ones will see a phase out of their tariffs over the next 3 to 10 years. And we're talking about a wide range of products. And in addition to the ones that Governor Mixon mentioned, construction equipment, fertilizer. There's a circle of opportunity that will expand even more when the Panama Free Trade Agreement takes effect later this year. And we're working to ensure that U.S. companies can make the most of these trade agreements and explore with great promise all that the Western Hemisphere has to offer. And when they do, we will always have their back and ensure that they are competing on a level playing field. Our trade agreement compliance program ensures that our partners are living up to their end of the bargain. American businesses deserve a fair shot when they enter the global marketplace, and we will always work hard to give them that fair shot. We're also encouraging our Latin American partners in other ways, participating with Brazil in a commercial dialogue and a CEO forum, both of which I co-chair, in an effort to strengthen the $75 billion merchandise trading relationship that we have with Brazil. We're working with Mexico to have regulatory cooperation and to improve our efficiency at the border. And we've partnered with governments all over South America to improve customs procedures. And through this engagement, we're going to continue to make significant strides in creating new opportunities for U.S. business. Now, the other side of the equation, the other important part of our economic recovery is an investment right here in our shores. When a foreign firm opens up new facilities or expands existing ones here in America, it spurs economic growth in our communities, and Florida knows this very well. According to the latest data, foreign-controlled companies employed nearly 240,000 Floridians. In the bigger picture, U.S. subsidiaries of foreign-owned businesses have a stock of foreign direct investment in the United States of about $2.3 trillion. And these companies employ more than 5 million U.S. workers. This translates into more than $400 billion in wages. With these benefits in mind, we want to see more investment come to our shores. So the President launched Select USA. It is housed in the Commerce Department. It is the first coordinated U.S. government-wide effort to promote and support business investment in the United States. It works with headquarters in Washington, but it's carried out throughout the world through our trade experts and now investment experts that are located around the world. They're spreading the word about the desirable market conditions in the American economy, including a hardworking and educated workforce, and of course, access to an incredible consumer base. And we're getting a great response so far. We look forward to working with each of you on this effort. So if you have any, or you know of any companies that are even thinking about coming to the U.S., we're ready to help them take a look at it. And as I said before, our work at the International Trade Administration is about opportunity. We want to give businesses new opportunities to reach new customers, to be part of dynamic economic growth that's happening around the globe, and to attract more money back home. We want to expand opportunities in overseas markets like regions in the Western Hemisphere. We want to protect those opportunities by enforcing our trade agreements, and we want to create opportunities here by attracting foreign investment. So all this goes a long way in achieving that dream that Bob Graham mentioned more than 35 years ago in his inauguration speech, a dream of a stronger, healthier, and more prosperous Florida. And as partners, we can achieve this dream. As partners, we can support the American entrepreneur and the American worker. as partners, we can accelerate the economic recovery in Florida and the United States. I know that you share these same goals. I look forward to working with all of you in the years ahead to achieve them. So once again, Governor, thank you for inviting me here. Thanks to the Economics Club of Florida for hosting me. It's been a real pleasure to be with you. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, for an excellent message. We will now, as is our custom, invite members only, please, to raise any questions that you have in mind. And the Undersecretary has said previously that he encourages questions. He likes the tough ones as well as the softballs. So the General has a question, I think.
Yes. Well, I should not be negotiating trade agreements. And if I ever start to, the ambassador reminds me that that's not my job. But we work very closely in first setting trade policy. And by that, we decide what are the next trade agreements that we're going to focus on and what are the issues that need to be raised. But once we do that in the interagency process, then it's the responsibility of the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, I think that's the office to which you're referring, to go and negotiate those deals. Sure. So our biggest, well, first of all, let me toot our horn just a little. Last year, the President got through Congress the Colombia, Panama, and South Korea free trade agreements. Combined, those three trade agreements are going to see an increase in exports of roughly $13 billion, which translates into thousands of jobs. So we got that done last year, and our focus now is in the Asia-Pacific region. The U.S. Trade Representative is negotiating the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Until just this week, it was 9 countries that were working together to have a multilateral trade agreement. Canada and Mexico just came on board, so it is now 11 countries. And the goal there is to create a platform to have even more countries join it. And the effect will be to lower trade barriers, not just tariffs, but non-tariff barriers, which are increasingly more difficult and more problematic than the tariffs. And so we're putting all our effort, well, not all our effort, but a lot of our effort there, and I think it's going to bear a lot of fruit.
Being complemented, of course, by the new defense strategy of a larger footprint.
Well, that's right. The President announced in the fall that we are putting a renewed emphasis, if you will, in the Asia-Pacific region, including our military, and certainly in the commercial and economic realm as well. Thank you, General.
Next question.
I just want to say, excuse me, I just want to say that all of us have been around this business for a long time know the conflict between the Department of Commerce and the Department of State. And there's a good place for you to constructively use your conflict resolution.
Yep. As I recall, you led some of those challenges when you were Secretary of Commerce.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
Welcome back to Florida.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Yesterday I had the opportunity to be part of a group from one of our universities that was hosting, via the State Department, 18 professors from around the world, all over the world, way outside of my realm. But they asked me, because I live here from the University of Florida, to put together an agenda. So part of the agenda included economic development. And of course I reached out to Enterprise Florida, and their representative was fabulous, and she came over. But as a compliment to you, I want you to know that an unannounced guest was your representative, Matt. And he made every point of selling the United States to them, that you would be very proud of United States citizens. And my question is, perhaps the most enthralling to them, from these folks from all over the globe, was our relationship with our neighbor to the south of us, Cuba, and addressing policy there. And I'd like your thoughts about where the administration might be in a second term in dealing with our neighbors, and the difficulties that are absolutely present to us is dealing with a communist, oppressive regime that was horrible to many of our friends and relatives in the States. in particular in our own state. But going forward, of how we're going to address that as opposed to where we're at right now.
Well, let me just say, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I'm not going to make news today. But I will say this. Let me first say where we've come in the last 3 years as it relates to our Cuba policy. When the president campaigns for president, he made two commitments. He first said he would lift the travel ban to Cuba by Cuban Americans. Before that, Cuban Americans could travel to Cuba once every 3 years. And he did so he made that statement for two reasons. One, for humane reasons. If you have a grandmother or a great aunt, it's just not right that you can't go see her when she may not make it for 3 more years. And so one was for humane reasons. But the second reason was that he believes the greatest ambassadors for change in Cuba are Cuban Americans. Cubans who have lived, in some cases, under both regimes, both in the United States as well as in Cuba. When he takes office, within 3 months, that travel ban is lifted. Cuban Americans can go as often as they like. The second one was to lift the restriction on remittances. Again, prior to his taking office, Cubans could only give so much, a very limited amount of money to their relatives back in Cuba. He lifted that. Again, the thinking being that better to empower the Cuban people. And while a little bit may go to Fidel, the bulk of it is still going to go to those families. So there has been a change. Now, here's the reality from a commercial standpoint. Cuba is an economic basket case. And it's nice to know that the Castro regime has finally acknowledged that their economic model is a dismal failure. But they have no money. And, you know, I'm from Tampa, Florida, and Tampa, a lot of the business community there believes that Tampa's savior, or the economic savior, is going to be as soon as we open up to Cuba. What I would say is this. Look to Brazil. Brazil is going to be pumping out 4 million barrels of oil a day by 2020. They're going to be spending a lot of money. Look to Colombia, that now is opened up with low tariffs. Look to Peru, where we already have a free trade agreement. Look to Asia. Cuba is in our future. But the reality is there really needs to be change on both sides. And, you know, I don't know what the future holds, but I would say we don't, as a business community, we don't need to wait for Cuba because they made such a mess of their economy. It's going to take a long time before there's huge opportunity there. We have made changes. I think those changes are right. We've encouraged more people to people. But in the meantime, there's tremendous opportunities all over the world that we can't wait for. We need to go take advantage of them right now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Undersecretary. Frank Sanchez has indicated he will be available for the media or for any members of the club or guests who would like to converse or raise additional questions after the program. Mr. Undersecretary, I want to give you a token of your esteem that we feel for you and your presentation here today. And I will tell you this gift is below the gift limit, so you'll be safe to receive it. But I think its value, though, will be more significant for you because you are a Floridian, and this is a copy of the Florida Handbook, which for years was edited by our beloved Alan Morris, who has passed away now, but this is an updated version for your library there in Washington, which you can refer to.
Thank you very much.
Thank
really
you.
Appreciate it. Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The meeting is adjourned.
You've been listening to a delayed broadcast of the Economic Club of Florida luncheon meeting of June 22nd, 2012. Join us next time for another meeting of the Economic Club of Florida on WFSU-FM.